I'm gonna do my best to. We should have no problem finishing the Old Testament up. When we get to the minor prophets, there's not a lot to say about that, but I'm trying to think of. There's only a couple chapters that come to mind. If you were to say, okay, is there any particular chapter in the minor prophets? I can think of a few, but not very many, that talk about a particular subject. And what this is about is just, having in your mind, being able to go to a chapter deals with. If I were to say, if we were going to talk about the resurrection, okay, there's one chapter of the Bible that is entirely about the resurrection. And 1 Corinthians 15, it's very long, chapter 2, but it has all that information. Well, once you understand that, you've got an idea in your Bible where something is and where it's talked about. There are other chapters, and you build on that. What you do is you'll be reading through a chapter. I'm thinking, how about Christian liberty? Anybody know a chapter in the Bible that deals with Christian liberty? Yep, that's one that's partial. I was thinking of Romans 12, where it talks about one day above, not esteeming one day above another and all that, and esteeming every day alike. And so just have them in your mind, it helps. Now like I said, we're in the Old Testament here, and I haven't committed nearly as many chapters to memory about certain subjects, but some come to mind, and you'll do this even from reading a lot of it. When I think of Ezekiel, I think of the cherubims, because outside of Ezekiel, you really don't have much information about those cherubim. So chapters 1 and chapters 10 deal with the cherubim, describes them, kind of gives you a little bit about their function and everything. So if somebody mentions cherubim, I know that Ezekiel 1 and Ezekiel 10 deal with those cherubim. There's one other chapter that deals with a certain cherubim. And this chapter, if there's two chapters I probably knew first in the Old Testament besides Genesis 1, was Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28. Why? Because in Ezekiel 28, you have the cherub in the Garden of Eden. You have another passage about that cherub and his fall. And so Ezekiel 28 sticks to mind. I couldn't tell you the verses, but I could go to the chapter and find them real quick. And so when I think of Ezekiel, I think of those cherubim. I think, well, I know I can find stuff there about, there's all kinds of stuff in Ezekiel. The building of the millennial temple. 40 to 48 deals with that. Now, there is two other chapters that come to mind, and these are the ones that you'll hear a lot prophetically. It's Gog and Magog. And I ain't quite figured the thing out. I guess others have, but I haven't. But it looks like there might be two different wars, one in 38, one in 39. But Ezekiel 38 and 39 deal with Gog and Magog. And that has to do with the last battles. One is... I'm not sure when one of them is, but one of them's at the end of the millennium. That's Gog and Magog in chapter 39. It looks like there might be an additional 38. There might be an additional one. There's some thoughts that we may have some type of war or limited war before the tribulation begins. Something that would kind of, you always need I'm going to forget the word, catalyst. Sometimes you need a catalyst to kick off something. Even in this thing we're studying in Job, the catalyst was the Lord. He's the one that kicked off the situation with Job. But why would people think that they need somebody from the stars or somebody from the heavens, somebody supernatural to show up? Why would they think that? Well, if everything's going fine, they wouldn't, would they? But if everything's going south, and there's a war, and let's say there's limited nuclear exchange, maybe North Korea gets vaporized or Guam or who, I don't know, but somebody gets vaporized. Boy, all of a sudden now mankind's crying out and said, we need somebody that can run our affairs that's smarter than we are. And then this white horse rider shows up, with a bow in his hand. And it's not the Lord Jesus Christ. Well, it may be that there's a war that kicks that thing off that's connected with Gog and Magog. When you talk about Gog and Magog and Meshach and Tubal, it looks like these are Eastern countries or Middle Eastern countries. I say they're Eastern countries, have to deal with maybe Russia, maybe Germany, which that's European countries, they're more Western, but they've got some connection to this, and it's enough to where the whole world stops and takes note. And that's about as much as I can say about it. The only thing I don't see in Scripture is where we are. I mean, America doesn't really, those three continents that Israel connects, you've got Asia, Europe, and Africa. And they're kind of like right there in the crux. That's where everything's going to take place. It happening between those three continents. We're kind of like an outlier, and there's not a lot in prophecy about us. So maybe we're the limited nuclear exchange. I don't know. Maybe the Soviets hack our system and explode our own bombs on our own soil. I don't know. Wouldn't surprise me. They're probably still run by old IBM machines, the 128s or something. Yeah, nothing like that would surprise me. You got to remember that even the most powerful kingdom on this earth at one time was, I'll get in a minute here, Babylon. And Babylon fell one night. Why? Because the enemy found out how to infiltrate. They went through their sewer system. They took a whole kingdom in one night. The Medes and the Persians, they found a way, man. And if they can find a way to destroy us, it may be quick. Anyway, so Ezekiel 1 and 10, Ezekiel 28, and Ezekiel 38 and 39 for Gog and Magog. Anybody else got a chapter that sticks out in particular? Okay, let's go to Daniel. And a lot of those, too many of those. I probably should know all the way through 12, but I don't. I think of Daniel chapter 2. Well, chapter 1 I know is about the king's meat. So that kind of stays with me. Chapter 2 is about Nebuchadnezzar's image. Chapter 3 is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. Now chapter 4 didn't come to mind, but chapter 5 did. Chapter 5 is Belshazzar's big blowout. That's the night where Babylon came to an end. The handwriting on the wall. Yeah, there you go. Handwriting on the wall. That's in chapter 5. That's fitting. A man's hand has 5 fingers on it, and it's all a man's hand writing on the wall. Chapter 6 is Daniel in the lion's den. And then the only other chapter, I mean, it's more than one chapter, but it's not the whole, encapsulating the whole subject. It's something that triggers of where it begins or where it's at. In chapter 9, Daniel 70 weeks. I know that runs through chapter 12 in dealing with that, but and actually it begins in chapter 8. But chapter 9 is the chapter that specifically talks about it. So I mentioned Ezekiel is an exile book. Daniel is an exile book. In other words, they're written while the children of Israel were in exile. Daniel's obviously in Babylon, and Ezekiel, I'm not sure, Ezekiel may span, some of them span, they go from pre-exilic to exilic. So he may expand that length there, because there's some things he's doing there. But Daniel's dead. We know where Daniel's at. He is in Babylon, so that's an exile book. Any other chapters in Daniel? Alexander the Great. Okay. And of course, you've got those different, you got the image, then you've got, and now I'm trying to think what they are. I'm sorry? Yeah, the he-goat and the rough goat. You got those different examples of the different kingdoms that are going to show up. I don't have that memorized as to which chapters are which. But I know it begins in chapter 2 with Nebuchadnezzar's image, and then I know they're after that. Sequential. I think Dr. Ruckman showed how that it's like a countdown to the final one. And I never got that. I never saw that, and over my head, a million miles. But he shows that it's just like counting down. First you have all these kingdoms in the image, and it just keeps going, bloop, 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 and lands on the Antichrist. He's the final kingdom. And of course, you know, that's not only did it come to pass historically, but it's going to come to pass prophetically. And it has been coming to pass. We've got America in that, we've got England in that, we've got Russia in that. They're all portrayed in those depictions. And we're just counting right down to the Antichrist kingdom too. It's going to happen. Where iron is mixed with miry clay. You know what that means, right? Huh? Genesis 6 all over again. As it was in the days of Noah. Things coming back. That's why I say I'm more, I don't know what would trigger a good response to me more if I read that they made contact from outer space. I think that would do it. And now it's just a matter of time before you hear that, right? It's just a matter of time before they come over the airways and say that, we've received a radio signal. It's not noise. It's not, black holes or stars or, white dwarfs and red dwarfs or whatever they are. This is a intelligent communication coming from outer space. It did not originate anywhere on this earth. It's going to happen. And they're getting you ready for it. And they're coming down. They're coming down. Now, whether they all come at once, I don't know, but they're coming down. So let's go to Hosea. And Hosea is pre-exilic, so they're not necessarily in order. In other words, you can't find all the pre-exile books and then the exile books and then the post-exile books. They're a little bit in order, but they're not in that good of an order. But when you come to Hosea, which is, we're in the minor prophets now. When you hit Daniel, you're in the minor prophets. Hosea has 14 chapters. No particular chapter in Hosea sticks out to me that I probably should, but it doesn't. I've even taught that one verse by verse, but it's been many moons ago. But there are 14 chapters in Hosea. It's around 785 BC. So it's pre-exilic. It's before the northern tribes go into captivity and definitely before the southern tribes. So it's a pre-exilic book, and it's written to the 10 tribes primarily. You can find references in there where he's dealing with some of the kings of Judah. They're even mentioned, but it's primarily dealing with the northern 10 tribes. And that's really what you got to keep in mind when you're looking at these minor prophets is who's it dealing with? Who's it addressing? I can't tell you how long it took me before I realized that when he was referring to the 10 northern tribes as Ephraim. I can't tell you how long it took me to figure that out. In fact, I think it's probably Dr. Ruckman that, and I'm like, all these years I had no idea that he called them Ephraim. So they get different names, like the two southern tribes, it's just called Judah, but it includes Benjamin because there are two tribes that broke off there and 10 tribes that were north and 2 tribes were right there around Jerusalem. You have, the next one is Joel, 3 chapters, and it's pre-exilic because it's talking about the destruction. I know it's very prophetical of the second advent, but it's also historically talking about the demise of Judah. This is 885 BC. This is really early. This is before Hosea. But and these dates, just pick one. They have different dates for everything. Everybody's got a different date. I kind of stick with Usher. I listen to Dr. Ruckman because I think he's got more sense than most of them. And a lot of times he'll agree with Usher's chronology of things. Sometimes he'll differ. And there are times when I just, the date of the writing versus the date of when he prophesied. Well, that's just one more number to confuse me. I just want to know when he prophesied, and I guess it's important when he wrote it down, but I want to know when he actually prophesied the thing. But Hosea is pre-exilic, Joel is pre-exilic, and go to Amos. Amos has 9 chapters, and Amos addresses the 10 northern tribes too. Huh? Didn't I tell you? Or didn't I say? Joel addresses the 2 southern tribes. Addresses Judah. Yeah, Joel 2, the latter rain. Joel, I take that back. Joel 2 and 3 not only deal with the early and latter rain where that thing taking place in the tribulation, but it's talking about the destruction at the Lord's coming. So Hosea, nothing really kicks out at me. Not really, should. But Joel 2, huh? Yeah, there's something in Hosea 3, though. Is it 3:1? Well, that deals with it right there. I thought there was something else here that's like I said, it's not really. It may have been up here at one time, but it has departed. Something that sticks out. I'm talking about a chapter that deals with something that I can, not just maybe just one verse, although one verse is fine if that chapter makes you think of it, but where it's discussing something. Where's that about on the third day he'll raise them up? I thought that was chapter 3. Bless you. Is that chapter 3? No. Isn't that in Hosea? After 2 days, and then on the third day, he said he raised them up. And I thought that was in Joel, or in Hosea, which goes to show you why I haven't committed it there. 6:2? Okay, there you go. Yeah, after 2 days will he revive us, and the third day he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. That's the restoration of Israel right there. All right. Amos, and I taught Amos verse by verse way long ago. We're talking Bible Institute days at Charity. Too long to remember a lot of it. And it has 9 chapters in it. It's around 787 BC. Amos is going to address the 10 northern tribes, and it is pre-exilic, pre-exile. Is it Amos 4:4? I'm talking about a particular verse. Is that the one that says, "Prepare to meet thy God, O Israel"? Nope. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, these sayings. Where is that at then? I thought it was in chapter 4. Prepare to meet thy God. Oh, here it is, 4:12. So there's a few things in chapter 4 I like. In chapter 12, or in verse 12, he says, talks about prepare to meet thy God, O Israel. Anybody else got anything in Amos? Okay, nothing comes to mind. What chapter of Obadiah really sticks out to you? Chapter 1 really sticks out to me. Consider we just taught it verse by verse. Now, Obadiah is different. Look at 1 Corinthians 10:32. This is a basic thing, but a lot of times you're thinking about what's addressed to the Gentile. And, before I really started looking at teaching some of these Old Testament books, I didn't think there was anything addressed to them, but there is. It's not a good letter addressed to them, but I'd say except for maybe Jonah. But here you have something that's addressed to the Gentiles, or at least to a specific Gentiles. Give none offense neither to the Jews, nor to the Gentiles, nor to the church of God. And everything in your Bible is addressed to one of those three groups or individuals, or groups of individuals. And here you have Obadiah, it's addressed to Edom. Well, they're Gentiles. So, come to find out there are 3 books of the minor prophets that are addressed to some Gentile, nation or people. And Obadiah is addressed to Edom. It is interesting that each one of them is a type of Rome. Edom in a way is connected, even means Rome in Hebrew, but it's a picture of it. Everything in this book, that's the thing you got to look for. Everything in this book is speaking about that time. That which hath been shall be. It is all picturing, typing. I mean, it's it's in ways you never thought possible that you're going to see it. It's all pointing toward that. And when you don't understand something, you just have to look a little deeper, because somewhere in there it's telling you about something that's going to happen in the future. Because really, what is the point of some of this stuff? It wouldn't help you, but if you knew it pictured something in the future, it's something quite different. And we know we were looking at that Edom and how that it tends to picture the accursed place, the accursed city. And that judgment is upon them. The next one is Jonah, and it's the second one that is addressed to Gentiles. Who is Jonah ended up preaching to? Who? The Ninevites. Who are the Ninevites? The Assyrian. Do you know that another name for the Antichrist is the Assyrian? Now here's where this is kind of weird, but we're going to jump one here in a minute. But Jonah is God showing mercy on these Ninevites. And Jonah preaches to them a pretty lackluster message, but one that got the point across, and had 120,000 converts, something like that. That's pretty good. I'd like to have that. I don't care what message I have to preach, and I'll even act like I don't like them if that'll help, because Jonah didn't like them at all. 120,000 children? So that's the children. That's pretty good. And a bunch of that's pretty good. So that makes sense to me now. That makes sense because it's not, okay, Jonah is 862 BC and Nahum is 713 BC. That's still quite a bit of difference in years. I'd have to check those dates and make sure they're right. The reason I'm saying that is when Jonah preaches, God has mercy on these Ninevites. I didn't realize, I never even made the catch that it's children. But they must be old enough to understand, right? You think it's just the children? Why would it be just the children, though? Can it be the adults that don't know their... Yeah. But maybe they're so ignorant of the truth that... I don't know. Huh? I thought it was the whole... He may have considered them like children because they didn't know their right hand from their left. Last verse, last chapter. Somebody...
compare Nineveh, that great city wherein are more than 64,000 persons that cannot discern between the right hand and the left hand, and also much cattle. So it's talking about kids.
Okay. Okay. Let me get back on track here, because that is interesting. I'm going to give that some thought.
3:5 talks about the whole city.
Huh?
The whole city believed God, proclaimed the fast, put on sackcloth from the greatest and the least. The whole city.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out, if he's referring to the whole city that don't know their right hand from their left, like you're going to some.
I think he just spares the whole city because he says wherein are more than. He's just saying that
There's enough of them that repented that he spared the city.
No, he's saying in the city there's enough that are children that haven't reached the age of accountability, possibly. They don't know the right from the left. They're before the age of accountability. He wants to separate the city.
Okay. I have to give that some thought. Never even.
I have the entire Bible study.
Okay. All right. So Jonah's preaching to a bunch of Gentiles. And then not 2 books later, Nahum prophesies against Nineveh. And Nineveh is going to picture another great city. Just like Jericho pictures it, so is Nineveh. It's going to picture like Rome and the Assyrian. And remember, you keep getting types. You've got a Babylonian king that's a type of the Antichrist. You've got an Israeli king, Ahab, type of the Antichrist. You've got an Assyrian. You've got, you've got the guy that built the tower. Huh? Nimrod. All these types. Just because they don't have the same, you can't there's correlation between them. He keeps telling you over and over, over and over. When you're reading through your Old Testament, you're just getting it over and over and over of what's going to happen. And they're missing it. The Jews are missing it. The church is missing it. It's got some, I understand the practical value. There's practical value in all this stuff. I mean, you learn things from it. But, man, God's telling you what the future is. That's what, you know what the spirit of prophecy is? It's the testimony of Jesus Christ, and that's the ability to foretell the future. This book foretells the future from beginning to end. Man, it's telling you how long the thing's going to last in the first 3 chapters of the book of Genesis. It tells you about the virgin birth. It's every major doctrine is taught in the first 12 chapters of the book of Genesis. Every major doctrine. So what I try to do is I try to get, and believe me, wrapping your mind around some of these is kind of tough. But it's got to be more than just he's going to destroy Nineveh, that he just had mercy on. I don't know what the time frame is between them, but their time had run out. And he pronounces judgments again. But let's go to Micah first, since it's the one after Jonah. Jonah has 4 chapters. Chapter 2 of Jonah, if I were to pick a chapter, because it talks about him going down underneath the waves and to the bowels of the earth, and he says, "Out of the belly of hell cried I." And here's the thing you need to know about Jonah. Jonah did not survive 3 days and 3 nights in a whale's belly. Okay? There may have been some character that did, and they have historical accounts where some people survived being swallowed by something, but not Jonah. Jonah died because he talks about corruption. And he talks about the belly of hell. He died and went to hell. So the reason Jesus Christ uses him as the example of the resurrection is because he was resurrected. Right? I mean, he died and he was resurrected. And then the whale vomited him out. But this thing about, I remember when I first got saved, man, I'm defending Jonah being alive. Oh, there's some evidence that people get swallowed. And it's like you just not believing what you read. Is it greater that he survived for 3 days in a pocket of stale oxygen inside a whale's belly, or the fact that God raised him from the dead? You choose. Maybe you think, well, they're pretty, both of them are pretty great. They are, but Jonah died in the whale's belly. Jonah chapter 2. Anybody else you got 4 chapters, but chapter 2 is the one that sticks out to me, where he's actually swallowed by the whale, and he goes down below the mountains and below, I mean, he's going down, down, down. And he talks about corruption. He talks about seeing corruption. So that's a great, and the fact that Jonah's preaching to the Gentiles. Micah is 7 chapters. It's around 750 BC, so that puts it pre-exile, but he's dealing with the southern tribes, not the northern tribes. So Micah is addressing Judah. Is there anything in Micah 7 chapters? Micah 5:2. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Never thought of that one. The prophecy of where Christ would be born, and thou Bethlehem Ephratah, like the county. So Micah's pre-exile. And then you have Nahum, which we just talked about, 3 chapters, and it's a prophecy against Nineveh. Against Nineveh. So we learned a little bit. I bet if we studied Nahum, 3 chapters in Nahum, I bet we'd make the connection between Nineveh and that whore. Because almost always does it have to deal with that. You know, especially when he talks about something accursed. After Nahum, Habakkuk. And nobody knows whether they're pronouncing it right. No, I don't know. I've always called him Habakkuk. I've called some of these by different names. I've heard them called a little bit differently. I've heard Job called Job. No, I'm just kidding. But 626 BC for Habakkuk. 3 chapters. And it's also pre-exilic of the southern tribes. Preaching to the southern tribes. Now, it's not saying it couldn't have a reference to the northern tribes, but it's primarily aimed at them. God sends He sends so many prophets to the northern tribes, sends so many prophets to the southern tribes. Habakkuk 2 is about drinking, isn't it? Habakkuk 2. That one sticks out. I just now thought of that one. That's a good, woe to him that giveth his neighbor drink, put it in his mouth to the bottle, something like that. So Habakkuk 2 is a good one. Zephaniah. Zephaniah is a contemporary of like Jeremiah, about the same time, 630 BC. And that's going to be pre-exilic of and aimed at the southern tribes. Does anything in Zephaniah stick out to any of you? I can't think of anything in Zephaniah. I can't remember the last time I read it either. It's been a while. Okay, Haggai. Around 520. How many of you pronounce it Haggai? How much? Haggai. Okay. Okay, good. Make sure I'm following the crowd. I will make sure I'm following the crowd. I love to follow the crowd. When you think of, when you get to Haggai, I'm about ready to call it Haggai. When you get to Haggai, this is post-exilic. It's after the exile. And look at the reference to this. The next 2 books are referenced in Ezra. Let me find Ezra in here. I got it. There we go. Ezra chapter 5, verse 1. Then the prophets, Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo, prophesied. Okay? Well, Ezra is when they went back to rebuild the temple. So it's post-exilic. It's after the exile. And then also it's mentioned in chapter 6, verse 14 of Ezra. And the elders of the Jews builded, they prophesied through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo. And they builded and finished it. Builded. I didn't know that was a word like that. I builded something one time and it didn't work out. But I cannot build it anything. Okay. Haggai, post-exilic, and it's of the southern tribes in Babylon. Zechariah, 14 chapters. Now, there's a whole lot in Zechariah. A whole lot I don't understand, too. It's post-exilic like Haggai. We just talked about that. Very prophetical of the second coming. I'll tell you what chapters stick out. There's only 2 chapters that really stick out. It should be more. Zechariah 5. Why does Zechariah 5 stick out? Because there's a UFO in chapter 5. If somebody talks about UFOs, I say, oh yeah, we're in Zechariah 5, there's an unidentified flying object. There's actually, a flying roll. You know what they say, that they look like a cigar. That's one of the descriptions of these UFOs. They look like a cigar. Well, if you look at a disc coming at you from the side, it looks like a cigar. So, and you got stork-winged women there. That's the closest thing to the Bible's well, if you want to talk about an angel with long hair that looks like women, this is the closest description of it, and it says it's evil. It's wickedness, it says. So, all your angels are male in the Bible, and you got something there that resembles a woman. And I think is it got teeth like a lion? No? That's Revelation? Okay. This thing where he talks about in Zechariah 5. Hey, Jeremy. This thing in Zechariah 5 where it talks about where it flies over and it casts a shadow. And if you happen to be where the shadow's cast, you die. And the valley of the shadow of death, he talks about in Psalms 23. See, even that has some type of trib application to this thing. But if you just imagine seeing something that's casting a shadow and knowing that shadow, if it comes over top of you, is going to kill you. And we're talking about unbelievers, obviously. I mean, here you are running from this thing. Oh, look out for the shadow. You know. Why? The shadow knows. I mean, you want to run away from that thing as fast as you could. But I can just see him just diving for cover, or putting a flashlight on him and see if it'd help. I don't know if it would. But, that was quick, wasn't it? Put a floodlight on him. See if it helps. But there's all kinds of things that happen in the book of Revelation. It's like reading science fiction. It really is. But it's not science fiction. You say, how's it going to happen? I don't know, but it's going to happen. I mean, there's something coming out of the bottomless pit by the thousands that will torment men for 5 months, and the description of them is some type of little monster, a flying monster. There's going to be millions of these things, evidently. And they'll torment men for 5 months. Do I believe that? I believe it 100%. Can I explain it? I can't explain it. Dr. Ruckman said they're the souls of the unsaved dead, and somehow they're morphed into something. If you could get out of hell for a while and torment people, would you do it? I probably would. I don't know. But what they are, I don't know for sure. What they do, it tells you what they do. And they, the problem with everybody else is they're trying to explain it by scientific terms today. And I've read everything that it's a helicopter with nerve gas coming out the tail, all kinds of, it's a bunch of Muslims with turbans on. I'm like, what? It's just crazy stuff. Instead of just believing what it said. It didn't say they came out of Iran or Iraq. It says they came out of the bottomless pit. Well, I don't know anybody there except for, the unsaved dead and probably some demoniac creatures down there. Other than that, I don't know who else it could be. But they come out of that thing and they torment men. And they, I think it's like, I think of all the mummy, the vampires, the zombies, Huh? Werewolves, I mean, all of it has some truth to it. You do realize that. You know, you got some that's an ordinary man, and all of a sudden he turns into a beast. Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, that's the same thing, man. See, one day he's a great leader, he's loved by the world, and about 3 days passes, and all of a sudden now he's a madman, looking to destroy anybody and everybody that won't take a mark. That's what they're going to get. And even the world's been telling you about it because the Lord's clued them in on it. And they're writing all this stuff, but you just don't see, you can make the application. Well, if you can make the application on the movies we have on today, then you can make an application for all these Old Testament books. Yeah, the only thing I've seen in sci-fi I couldn't make a connection was The Night of the Lepus. How many of you have seen that? This is when you're so bored. I think I was a teenager, so bored, and I'd watch just about anything, and it was black and white. I had a little black and white TV, and it was The Night of the Lepus. It was about giant rabbits. It just did not have the effect. You know what I mean? These soft bunnies hopping around. They were giant, and people were screaming and yelling and running from them, but I'm like, it just didn't, you know, I couldn't make the application of it, although it is an unclean animal. But I couldn't get any tribulation application from that, even looking back. At the time, I wasn't saved. No saved person would ever watch that, of course. So I was unsaved at the time. Just want to verify that, you know. If I was watching a black and white TV, I was still unsaved, I think. I mean, who knows? Anyway, chapter 14 of Zechariah deals with the Feast of Tabernacles, Millennium. That one kind of sticks out, Zechariah 14. Maybe that's where we get the 14's the number of deliverance. And then I can't think of, I'm sure that Keith here, he could probably give us a bunch of chapters out of Zechariah. But.
Chapter 6, two men from Babylon show up and give crowns of gold and silver to Joshua and talk about the capital letters branch.
Yep. Interesting. Yeah, that branch, that thing winds up coming around 3 times, picturing him as a prophet, priest, and king. Oh, no, four times for the 4 Gospels. Yep. The branch ends up showing 4 times in Scripture, picturing the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Or something else. Yep. You've got some prophetical things of his life. What's that? Yep. Anybody got anything else? I was going to say something else. There's mention of horses over there, but they're a little bit hard to match. Whether they're in relation to the ones in Revelation chapter 5 and 6. Huh? The idol shepherds mentioned in Zechariah. IDOL. Okay. Let's look at the last one here. We're out of time. Malachi, 4 chapters. I put the date, this is my date, 401 BC. All I did was add 4 years to what Usher did, because he said it's plus or minus 4 years from 4004, right? I just subtract that 4 and you have to add it back onto the others. 401, perfect. It's amazing how it works out. 400 years of silence. Post-exilic. Now, you know, Dr. Rubin says something about is it Haggai? In Haggai. And when I first read it, I said, Doc, there's 3 of them, but that's not what he was saying. He's saying there's 2 of the post-exilic prophets mentioned in Ezra. Just the 2 that are mentioned. Here's one more, Malachi. Because Malachi is definitely after the exile. And he is the last prophet before 400 years of silence. There's 2 chapters that stick out. Chapter 3, which every Baptist learned by the time they were this high, about tithing. That's where it says, will a man rob God? Yet you've robbed me in tithes and offerings. I mean, Malachi 3, man, knew that one. And then chapter 4, Second Advent. The last two mentioned, I believe, in Malachi chapter 4 is Moses and Elijah in the last chapter. And they're the ones that are prophesied to come before the great and notable day of the Lord. So, and the fact that the last word in Malachi is curse, picturing that there's, and remember, this is the Gentile, the church. The alignment of the books given to us run from Genesis to Malachi, whereas a Hebrew Old Testament runs from Genesis to 2 Chronicles. Same number of books, different order, and the order is prophetical in itself. The last verse, we talked about that in 2 Chronicles 36. The last 2 or 3 verses there tells that Jew to go home. That's the last thing that a Hebrew reads in a Hebrew Old Testament. And 2 Chronicles 36 is go home. Why? Because what's going to happen? You don't want to be anywhere else. Go home. And when they wouldn't go home and they're commanded to go home, God said, I'll drive you home. First World War sets aside a land for Israel, 1918. Second World War drives them back. He has a way of getting them back if he wants them back. So Malachi, you have after Malachi, 400 years of silence, and the next person to speak actually is John the Baptist, but the Lord Jesus Christ speaks. And then we've called that 400 years of silence. We think, okay, 1611. I mean, man, I was hoping for 2011 when the Lord would say, come up hither, the next words, but not to be, not to be. Could be soon, though. Could be soon. All right, anybody else got anything in Malachi? Okay. All right, we'll get into the New Testament. It'll break some ground you're all a little bit more familiar with. Is there any question about what we covered? Yeah.